Welcome back to the second half of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW 107.7 LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. You can also find us on Brattleboro Community Television and our new Montpelier Happy Hour Facebook page and the Montpelier Happy Hour.captivate.fm webpage. You can check us out in both places.
Congratulations on doing the work on that, Olga.
Why, thank you. And thank you for your patience while I figured out.
No patience required.
The new world. Well, thank you, darling. So let's touch base on the state of the state address, because I think with everything happening in DC, a lot of it's just gone by. A lot of Vermonters' bandwidth just kind of flew right past it. So for you, what were some of the key takeaways?
I should have known you were going to ask me that.
Do you want me to ask you a different question?
No, it's fine. So there was a lot of talk, as we've sort of already touched on, about moderation and unity. And as we've discussed many other times on the show, there are different ways to compromise and seek unity. And one of them is watering everything down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the flavor of this speech from my perspective. It was very calming, which I think, is probably the appropriate tone for that a lot of people are seeking right now.
Especially from a governor.
And a lot of gratitude for frontline workers, National Guard and teachers, and a lot of really, some of the Vermont exceptionalism that we do deserve around how we come together to take care of neighbors, and how we have been, all things considered, very responsive to mandates and, social distancing and all of that. It is not very rich in content, the remarks, but some threads I can pull. And if anyone is seeking to follow it, I highly recommend the governor's Twitter feed or Jane Lindholm's Twitter feed, because you can just sort of scan through all the remarks fairly quickly, and they're in little bite-size, maybe to match the teleprompters, bite-size pieces. So sometimes for me, that's a little better for my brain than watching someone talk in a slow, steady way. So there are threads around the economy and how it can reach more corners of our state, how a robust economy can reach more corners of our state. But it's not clear how or for whom.
Okay.
So again, is this about increasing wages for people in those corners of the state? That certainly wasn't highlighted. There was more language about businesses and the economy than there was about people and how they experience the economy.
Right. Which has been a theme, I think, of the governors.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So again, we are not using the phrase trickle down explicitly because we know that we're not supposed to use that anymore, but the ideas are still strong in there. Still strong in there.
The pig has a new form of lipstick. Is that what you're saying?
The
new shade of lipstick?
No, I think we just haven't even. It's like more that we're pretending it's not a pig anymore. Is that what I don't know what the lipstick thing means, Olga. I can't work with that.
It means you're trying to gussy up something that really shouldn't be gussied
up.
I
think it's more than that. I think it's more that you're like using soy-based bacon but pretending it's bacon, or I don't know. I'm gonna fail no matter what I try to say next. So
moving on.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a lot of sort of like lowering costs for businesses so that they can thrive, and not a lot about, so that they can pay living wages or, hire
Mm-hmm.
more people or anything like that. Um,
Mm.
and then some conversation about education. And so again, starting off with this theme that I really agree with, that like we've realized how important our schools are for families and kids and how important that is and how much we value it. And then pivoting to what I think is sort of a hint around some more testing, but it's not really quite clear to me. There's stuff about sort of like literacy standards
Mm.
and the cost of education
Mm-hmm.
being
A
too high.
perennial topic in Vermont. Yes.
Yes. Um, and then early childhood being very important. And a push to actually bring that in under the agency of education. Early care and
Huh.
education has, for folks who don't know where every piece of their bureaucracy is, early care and education has always sat in the Department of Children and Families in the Child Development Division. And
Right.
since pre-K was implemented, some of the funding for some of that sits in the Agency of Education. And so it's become a collaboration between the Agency of Education and the Child Development Division. But he's very much saying that he's going to request that child development moves entirely into the Agency of Education. And on the face of it, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the way each of those agencies work is very differently.
Right.
And the Child Development Division, the way they do their work, it's a regulatory division.
Oh, right. Good point.
And the Agency of Education is not regulatory. It could probably stand to do a bit more of that. But they really are essentially moving money and reports is the bulk of what they do. They do very little technical assistance for districts. Districts are left to do that on their own. And they tend to not regulate or enforce. And so it would be a big shift to either bring regulation and enforcement to the Agency of Education, who is not really familiar with that, which might have some benefits, I don't know, or be really sort of releasing the Child Development Division from that regulation and enforcement, which would have huge implications for the quality of early care and education. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's an inspiring story about Spanish flu, and then we're done.
Okay. One thing that has struck me often when we talk about some of these big issues facing Vermont and different lawmakers, including the governor's approach to them, and I was again going back to DC and Trump's video tweets about, oh, you're so special and you're right, but go home and be, like having his cake and eating it too. I've been thinking about language, and what I find so fascinating about some of the language that has been moving through the state house over recent years is it's like big words that a lot of concepts can be put into, but there's no definition.
Yeah.
Like affordability. We've talked about this
There's
before,
so much,
how,
yes.
yeah, I think a lot of people, you say, yeah, we need to make Vermont affordable. And most people go, yes, we do.
Mm-hmm.
But the how and what affordable means and what it means for who, widely distant definitions, I think, at times.
And the governor's state of the state has always, in my, my limited experience, been a mix of those very broad, vague concepts, and then these like little minds, a very small nibble around the edges. I remember having this exact conversation with you last year.
That's right.
These very
Yeah.
small nibble around the edges proposals that are named very explicitly in the state of the state. Like he named mini TIFs. Do you know what a mini TIF is, Olga?
I do, but we should
Okay.
explain it for listeners.
I'm not going to. We can talk about it some other time, but like it's certainly not so important a concept that it deserves to be in the state of the state. That's all I
It's an
want to
economic development contest,
and like
basically.
A very small tool in the toolbox that often doesn't work very well at all. So it's just funny, like these little nibble around the edges minds that are very explicit, but are not really connected. They're certainly not going to solve or remedy or create change around these huge concepts that are sort of floated through the speech.
Mhm.
And so
So
he can say, I care about affordability in the economy, and I'm going to do mini TIFs. And then when we don't do mini TIFs, he'll say, the Democrats, they don't care about the economy and affordability, but like it's not,
mhm.
they're not robust theories of change, I guess is all I'm going to say.
So I have a kind of a dumb question to ask.
I doubt that.
Well, I'm feeling I should know the answer and I just don't. So here's my question.
Mhm.
So prior to the legislative session starting, does the governor, Scott, Shumlin, whomever, it happens to be governor, and whomever happens to be House and Senate leadership, do they all get together and say, okay, here are what we think Vermont needs. Here are some of the things we care about. Let's all get on the same page so we're rowing the boat together. Or at least we know where we're not rowing the boat together. Like, do they have any kind of meeting to kind of,
I think that would probably be a better question to ask of either Senate or House leadership, maybe next time they come on the show. But
okay,
my understanding is it's very different from different administrations. And
gotcha.
the Scott administration has been fairly famous for the way they don't
Mm-hmm.
participate in those conversations and will wait
This is true.
until the very last minute to say no.
Mm-hmm.
That's not of interest to us. Including, you'll ask members of the administration who you're involved in active problem solving with, agency heads, et cetera, questions, and they'll say, I can't answer that until the governor's budget comes out, And so we spend weeks working on things that we, would have certainly been better with further content and context. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's like, there's a lot of sort of political gamesmanship involved in that lack of transparent communication. Can you hear those dings when they happen?
No,
Great, great. Okay,
that's good. That means you can't hear my heating system
okay.
popping.
No, but this is like internal to my computer, so it must be somehow like isolated from you. It's great. Um,
Yay!
yes. So, so no, we have our own agenda, and I think we actually broadcast our agenda fairly broadly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and transparently. And certainly when the speaker and the pro tem spoke last night, I watched on WCAX. I think there's probably a lot of other opportunities to listen or hear it. They were very transparent about sort of where the priorities are. That's, childcare and broadband and other aspects of recovery from there.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of sort of the really big lifts, that will be where it is.
Okay. So how about committees? Because usually that's where a lot of the work, the actual work on bills happen is
Yes.
committees. And I went through and I just looked for Windham County, and it doesn't look like a lot of changes. Carolyn Partridge is still the chair of Ag and Forest. We have some new members, such as Michelle Boslin, who was put on corrections and institutions, and Leslie Goldman, who is added to healthcare. But I don't.
There's actually
vice chair. You're vice chair of Ways and
I
Means. That's
am vice
new.
chair of Ways and Means, Olga. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's quite exciting, and a big change. We have not, and Tristan Tolino was assigned to appropriations.
Okay, that's new.
And that is new. And so Vermont
great.
actually has not, until I was moved to Ways and Means mid-pandemic in the spring, Windham County had not actually had someone on a money committee for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we have the two of us, me as vice chair on Ways and Means and Tristan on appropriations, which is fantastic. We also, Sarah Coffey is vice chair of corrections and institutions, which has its own budget attached to it, and is going to do a lot on criminal justice reform.
Right.
And on clean water, which are two things that Windham County cares very much about.
Mm-hmm.
And then having someone from Windham County on healthcare is really huge and important. Leslie's a great person to be there. She has, been working in the healthcare field her entire career. and in a number of different roles. And so between the retreat and sort of ongoing conversations around the BMH network and what that means, I think it's going to be really important that we have someone and someone knowledgeable and capable on healthcare. And so
Yes.
those are all really exciting pieces. And then
Laura Sibilia on energy and tech is important too, because they do the broadband.
They do the broadband, yeah, and that's something that Laura has been leading on, and something really important to, we have this really sort of front of the pack communications union district in our region, partly because of the work of Laura. And then Rep. John Gannon, who's also a Windham County rep, is staying as vice chair of GovOps and is really leading the charge on redistricting, which is something that's going to have a huge impact on Windham County.
Okay.
Because we've had such population shifts in the last 10 years. And so that's going to make a big difference. And I'm really grateful that we have a Windham County rep on that too.
We have two.
Yes.
Mike Maricki's there as well.
And Mike Maricki's there as well. So yeah, it's been, and Molly is still on transportation, bless her heart. I don't even think I could do it for 2 years and she loves it. And it's incredible, to have someone from Windham County on that too. Like the Route 9 corridor is very contentious. It's really important that we have her there. And then she's been like beating this drum and for years, very much in isolation about alternative transportation. Yeah. And she finally, has enough colleagues that she's able to see some movement on that. And that's going to be really powerful when I think about COVID recovery, and when I was sort of earlier talking about, I can see a nexus between COVID and so many issues. Transportation changes are a huge one of those, right? Like there are a lot of people who are now working from home much more and might into the future. What does that mean for how many vehicles they need? I know at my house, we have 2 vehicles, we have 3 drivers. And before this, I was like, oh my God, do we need a 3rd vehicle? That's disgusting. But now I actually have to go out of my way to remember to alternate vehicles I'm driving to make sure that they get started regularly. So I think there's a lot of things about that, how we think about Medicaid rides and school busing and sort of both health and safety related to that, but also how we can better integrate those systems so that folks who live in rural areas are able to get places without a vehicle. I think that's really huge as our population ages even more.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of fun action. I hope now I'm scared that I missed someone.
Kelly Pajala, we didn't mention
Payala.
that she's on Payala, sorry.
It's okay. I'm not Kelly. Don't apologize to me. And Kelly being on human services, and she's one of the members that's been on that committee for a long time. They are leading the charge on childcare. She's been really involved with that. She's on the after school working group, which is really tasked to find a solution to the after school challenges and funding challenges for that in our state. And so she's going to do some great work on that. And is able to do it from the perspective of someone who lives sort of outside of the regular metro areas.
Yeah.
And so I'm confident that she's going to be advocating for solutions that meet the needs of everyone in Windham County, not just Brattleboro folks. So that's really great.
Yeah, if folks aren't aware of some of the childcare legislation that Vermont has worked on in recent years, it's worth a look if you feel like being geeky, because one thing that's always impressed me about that big childcare bill that came out last session.
Did we do a show on that?
We did. And I will try to find it and put it on our Facebook page as a reminder. But one thing that's always impressed me about that bill is it focused on childcare, but focused in all the ways that what intersected with childcare.
Yeah.
And I just thought that this is kind of a great way. I hope we see more bills like this.
And we're going to do that again this biennium.
Yay.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. Yeah. And then, Michelle being on corrections and institutions, she was put there because her background is her work life is in restorative justice. She worked at the Brattleboro Restorative Justice Center. And so having someone with some on the ground experience of re-entry is going to be really huge there.
Right. That's a great point. Thank you.
So,
and
Sorry, one
Oh,
thing.
no,
So
go ahead.
this is one of the ways that we talk a lot about how the committees create silos in systems.
Yeah.
And one of them is that our restorative justice system in Vermont on the ground is often quite integrated between pretrial and release.
Mhm.
It's the same people who are sort of working on those issues. But
Right.
in the legislature, that's divided between judiciary and corrections institutions.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so I'm really excited that we have sort of people with expertise on both of those committees on these, who have worked in those systems. And so that's really exciting.
That is very exciting.
Mhm.
Thank you for bringing
And I
that
know that
up.
that's a huge theme in the report from the Brattleboro's Community Safety Committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is also on the brattleboro.org website, right on the homepage in the right-hand sidebar. And I recommend people check it out because it's a really well-written, very in-depth report that makes connections between different parts of the community that I think traditionally have been siloed, and people's experience of them that are really, really important and key. Fantastic. Any other thoughts on committees? I mean, how about for you as a vice chair? How are you seeing your committee life change? What are you excited about? I see your face lighting up.
I am lighting up because I really have no idea. I'm very excited. I am, as probably anyone who's ever watched the show or met me, I'm a very high context person. I like as much information about any situation as I can possibly get. And so being vice chair means that I will, be able to be part of conversations that I wasn't a part of before. And so that will be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to think about tax policy in the context of the pandemic and pandemic recovery.
Yeah.
Because as we know, it's further exacerbated the rich getting rich and the poor getting poor. In terms of it's really split the middle class in a way that
Oh,
wasn't quite
interesting.
split
Yeah.
before.
Yep.
And we've talked about this sort of K-shaped recovery before. And so that's really interesting to think about. And that we're moving sort of more towards individuals with wealth and, while we have a lot of businesses that are struggling, and that's sort of another interesting twist as well. So that will all that's going to be fun. I'm excited for the new opportunity. It also is just a really heartening honor. I often feel like such a troublemaker. And to know that people asking too many questions, sharing my perspective too often. And so to have that show of confidence from both my chair and from House leadership is really heartening in terms of what is possible in Vermont politics.
Yes. I think for your birthday, I'm going to give you a t-shirt that says good troublemaker.
Aw, thanks. It's in October, so we're going to have to wait a while.
Oh, we will. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, well. You have something to look forward to now.
I do. I didn't until this moment, but now I have something to look forward to.
Looking ahead for the next coming weeks, I know a lot of things are in play in the State House. Anything listeners should be paying attention to?
The first thing that's going to be moving, and like really much faster than we usually have a bill moving, is a bill about town meeting.
Oh, yes.
Which is does not change anything for Brattleboro at all. And so if people catch wind of it and get concerned, Brattleboro essentially has a carve out because of our strange and special town meeting situation.
That happens later in the month.
That happens later. It's actually not that it happens later that makes us so special. It's that we know who's going to attend.
Yep.
So in having conversations about town meeting and moving town meeting to a virtual format, it didn't feel possible and just to be moving it virtually for communities who couldn't do explicit outreach to every single person, and the level of technical assistance that Brattleboro engaged in to make sure that every town meeting member had a place to connect and a way to connect and understood how the technology worked.
Right.
So in other communities, town meeting is something you wander into.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than some people are sort of explicitly expected to go there. And so because of that, this legislation enables Australian ballot for communities that have not done that before for their town meeting provisions, or to push town meeting. Communities have a choice of that, but they don't have a choice of going virtual, whereas Brattleboro is still able to do that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we already do Australian ballot for a bunch of our, on town meeting day, we have Australian ballot voting. And so that's going to stay the same way it always is. Though I imagine we'll be able to mail those ballots. I have not checked with our town clerk about that yet. We were not mailing those ballots.
At the last select board meeting, Hillary Francis, Brattleboro's town clerk, recommended that they keep to the traditional system of, if you want a ballot, you need mailed to you, you need to request it.
Oh, okay.
And the select board agreed with that. So yes, if you're in Brattleboro and you want your ballot mailed to you, request it.
Okay, so nothing has
request
changed.
it for the whole year. Yeah.
And is the town clerk's office going to be open? Are they open now? I know they didn't used to be open before.
Oh, so if you want to vote in person at the town clerk's office, you mean? That, I'm going to say probably not. She did say something about that, but I don't remember what it was. But I think it was probably not.
Okay.
So you'd either have to get a ballot and mail it back, mailed to you, or vote on voting day at the polls.
Or my guess, and maybe we should do some more research and talk about this more. You could make an appointment to pick up a ballot and then drop it in the drop box.
That is probably, I will double check that because I actually think I have to write an article about it.
Oh, well, once you learn about this for your article, listeners are welcome to go read Olga's article, or maybe we can just sort of do a quick check-in about this next week.
Yep.
So anyway, that's the legislation that's going to be moving the fastest because it's sort of necessary. And then there were a few deadlines or sunsets that we put in COVID legislation because we thought it was going to end sooner or something. So there's some workers' comp legislation that I think we've talked about before on the show that has a sunset of January 15th. That's going to need some quick action. Some issues around unemployment insurance and how much employers pay is going to have some quick action. And I'm sure a few other things that I do not know about.
Okay.
And Fantastic. Then, you know, the other thing that I'm so sorry I didn't start with or lead with is the Biden administration. And actually pre-Biden administration, there is money that is coming here, that has come here. So figuring out how to spend that is going to be a pretty key chunk of time and effort. And unemployment insurance, the extra $300 that was in that bill has already started being paid out for folks.
Great.
And the other piece of that is even more important, I don't know if it's more important, it's equally important, is that folks who maxed out their benefits, there was a lot of people who maxed out their benefits at the end of December, actually. That has been extended.
Okay.
And so both of those things are very exciting.
Yeah, very fantastic. Okay.
And so once again, public service announcement, if you're having trouble with the unemployment insurance system and you need help, please feel free to get in touch. Yes. I do not make magic, but sometimes I can raise a flag.
Yeah. A word to all, even if you're not getting in touch with Emily and you're getting in touch with another lawmaker, don't wait. Do it sooner rather than later if you're struggling. Because the sooner you can kind of disrupt the struggle, the better.
Yes.
So we unfortunately are out of time. This hour just went by so fast. It's so fun to reconnect.
Oh my goodness, it has.
It really has.
It's so good to talk to you, Olga.
So quickly, do you have a toast for our listeners? Or I can toast.
To a new year with new ideas and new solutions and a fresh look at democracy.
I love it. Here, here. Mm. And napkins.
Napkins to napkins.
Well, everybody here on the Montpelier Happy Hours show, you can find us at 2 p.m. on WVEW 107.7 LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. You can also, on Fridays, you can also find us at the Montpelier Happy Hour.captivate.fm, as well as our Montpelier Happy Hour Facebook page. Emily, if people have questions for you.
You can call me, email me, text me, come to my weekly community conversations every Saturday at 10 a.m. via Zoom. And how to do any of those things you can find at my website, emilykornheiser.org.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.